What's up, guys? Welcome to my channel. My name is Paul Lamine, or IT Disciple, whichever you want to go with is fine with me. And today we're going to be talking about how I studied for and passed the Linux Plus. The Linux Plus is one of those certificates that I have a long time ago for. I don't want to talk about it in this video because I don't want to distract you guys from other things. Today we're just going to be talking about the Linux Plus here. But also, before we get into the video, I wanted to say that I'm going to be coming out with a series of videos. So I know that a lot of times when people pass certificates, they come and then they talk to you and be like, hey, this is what I do. This is the book that I used to study for the certificate. I wanted to be something, I wanted to do something different. So in this case, I wanted to start creating a vlog where you guys get to see me go through the whole process of some of the certificates that I'm studying for. You know, get to see me study from the beginning, or get to see the process that I go through from the beginning all the way to the end. So I'm going to start creating a series of vlog every single week, kind of like wrap things up for the things that I do to study, to kind of progress through the process of trying to get the certificate. And for those of you guys that are planning to take a specific certificate as well, you might look at it and be like, hey, this is what it's doing, and this is some of the things that I can do. So that's going to be interesting. But anyway, that's beside the point. Today we're here to talk about this guy, the Linux Plus. So let's roll the intro clips and let's get started. Oh, don't forget to hit the thumbs up button and subscribe if you like the video. Let's go. So let's talk about the books that I use. Now, if you've been watching my videos for a while, you know that I go heavy on books and labs and videos and everything. I go in on those. Those are my thing, right? So let's talk about the books that I use to study for the exam. I'm going to talk about the two main books that I use and the ones that I feel like they're quite beneficial to being able to pass the exam. And I'm going to do something like a honorable mention or something like that. Some of the things that I have and I've read and I feel like those are kind of okay too, but they're not so much geared towards the Linux Plus itself, but they help you better understand Linux. And as you know, I try to cover as much material as I can before taking an exam. So the first book that we're going to talk about, if I can on here, is this guy right here. This is CompTIA Linux Plus XK004. This is the book that I use, the main book that I use to study for it. It's a Pearson book. It's a really good book. The reason why I love this book, let me open it for you guys. You can see the reason why I love this book is because, number one, it goes according to the exam objective. And if you know me and if you've seen some of my videos, all 4 of them, I'm coming slowly but surely. And if you've seen some of my videos, one of the things that you're going to realize is that I'm very big on books that go exactly according to the exam objective, because that makes your life a lot more easier. You can take a look at the exam objective one time and understand what you have to study, but then you can just put that aside and then just go with the book, because the book covers the exam objective, and this book does that pretty well. It was an easy read. It was an amazing read. I enjoy reading it. It was really, 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 really helpful. For a lot of the concept, it dives really deep into it, and it gives you a really good understanding of some of the things that you have to understand. And with Linux, there's certain things that you just really have to understand, and this book does a good job. There's sometimes, and I'm going to talk about the second book, where I wanted to understand a certain topic and I didn't feel like the book covered that well. Then I have the backup book that I'm going to show you guys in a minute that I used to kind of use as a backup for this book, and to help me understand some of the things that I feel like were not too clear in this book. But as a whole, it's a great book. It's an amazing book. I really enjoyed it. Okay, so let's talk about book number 2. So book number 2, this book is, man, this is another great book. Let me put a little bit closer for you guys. It says Linux Portable Command Guide. This is a great book. Now, remember what I said earlier about this, the book that we just looked at, where I said that book goes according to the exam objective, and it makes it easy, and it tries to explain in detail some of the things that you have to understand. But this book is so super amazing that this is the book that you want to read after you've read this book, you've watched your videos, you've done your labs, and you've done whatever it is that you have to do and watch another series of video. This is the book that you want to read to round things up, because this book just like, hey, exam objective number 1. And when I mean granular, exam objective number 1, this is the little thing about the exam objective, this command that you have to understand. This book really dive into that, and it says, this is the command, this is what it does, this is how you can do it. Go in and do it. Like this book, and the thing I like about it as well, it's a pretty, I don't want to say easy read, but it's about, in total, about 300 and something page. So you can easily read this in about a week. depending on how fast you read, depending on how fast you want to absorb the information, you can read it in about a week. But this book is a great roundup book. I honestly feel like if you watch the videos and you do the labs and you get into Linux and you do what you need to do, this book alone can help you pass the exam, because this book just goes step by step according to the exam objective. And it's just a simple read. It's just a quick read, to kind of reinforce some of the things that you watch in the video, to kind of reinforce some of the labs that you do. You just read this book, and this book kind of help you say, hey, if you didn't understand it, here's this little snippet, this is what it is, and this is how you understand it better. So great book for roundup. It turns out that I read all two of the books, and I read a little bit more books. I'm going to talk about the honorable mentions, but this is a great book. This is an amazing book. It's another Pearson book, of course, as well. But if you just want a quick roundup of things, and you don't feel like you want to read this book, right? You just want a quick roundup. You've watched the video, you've done your lab, right? You've done your practice test, right? And you just want a quick roundup. This is the book for you. You don't necessarily, I don't want to say you don't need this book, because I kind of like both of them. But if you don't feel like reading something this heavy, this book, I will highly recommend this book. It's an amazing book. It really goes according to the exam objective. And this is one of the reasons why I like Pearson book, because they just, some people don't like them, but I do. I think that they just go according to the exam objective, and they make it easier for you to understand. That's it. So this is the next book. So I want to talk about quick honorable mentions. I'm not going to go into detail. I'm just going to talk about them real quick. One of the books that I found interesting was this one, Linux Basics for Hackers. This was pretty interesting, kind of really basic. This two books that I've just talked about kind of dwarf this book a little bit in terms of like the detail and going into Linux as a whole, as an operating system. When this book kind of focused on some of the things that you need to know as a ethical hacker or as a hacker using Linux. So pretty interesting read. I wouldn't necessarily read this book if I'm going for the Linux Plus, but I thought that it was a pretty interesting read for me. And it's a book that I'm going to read again once I approach taking the OSCP. Is a book that I'm definitely going to read again. This book is pretty interesting. It's a Linux Pocket Guide. It's very similar to this book, right? When this book is much more geared towards, passing the Linux Plus. This book is not so much geared towards passing the Linux Plus, but it kind of explains to you some of the things that you have to understand about Linux. I didn't read every single thing step by step. I don't think that's what this book is made for, and that's not how I used it. I kind of used it as a, hey, I don't understand the concept. Is it in this book? Oh, hey, I need to do this. Is it in this book? Oh, hey, I need to run this command. Is it in this book? So pretty interesting book to have if you're really going to go into Linux and you really want to learn more beyond just the Linux Plus. This, I started doing this recently, laminated documents that just kind of outline some of the quick things that you need to know about Linux. Like it will talk about the file system, for example. It will talk about like different aspect of Linux, the command summary, that kind of thing of Linux. And I do this for all of the exams that I'm taking recently. If there's a laminated kind of thing like this for that exam, I don't know, I buy it. I like it. I take it to work with me in the morning when I'm studying. I just kind of like, so you know what I'm, yeah. And then just go through it. We used to have things like this back home. So it just kind of, a bit nostalgic a little bit to have it in the US as well. And it's just pretty interesting. But anyways, I thought it was an honorable mention. It's a quick thing to have in your bag as well, or your binder, to have it in there and be able to just quickly pull it out and just be able to look at it if you need to use it. Another thing as well, one last thing that I want to mention is that when you want to pass an exam, you have to really get into the idea of, I want to pass this exam, I'm going to become this exam. I know it's a weird thing to say, but that's how I feel about every exam that I take. The point I'm trying to make is that when you want to take this exam, you have to really become this exam. You have to really pay attention and really dive into them and really study for them within that month that you've set aside, or within that time period that you've set aside to pass your exam. And for me, doing that meant that I changed my OS from Windows to Linux at home. I still do run Linux because I'm so in love with it. I do use Windows heavily at work because that's what we use in our environment. But at home, my home computer, my main computer, my daily driver is Linux. And I did that when I wanted to take the Linux exam. That's the reason why I'm mentioning that, is because that's something that you can do yourself, right? If you really want to pass the exam, throw yourself in there. Change your computer to a Linux computer and just dive into. You're going to run into troubles that you're trying to do, and then you're going to be like, man, I can't do this. Oh well, figure it out. And that through that process of figuring things out and using Linux on a day-to-day base, you're able to pass the exam. I use Linux every single day now because, as I said, it's my main driver, and I'm so used to Linux now. I only use Windows when I'm at work or Windows on my laptop, but Linux is my main driver. So that's one thing that I wanted to say. When you want to pass an exam, become the exam. It sounds like one of those weird sayings, but that's the truth. Become the exam and do everything that you possibly can to pass the exam. So that's the end of the books that I use for the Linux exam. The books and the physical materials, or if that's what you want to call it, that I use for the Linux exam. So one of the first things that I do, and this is something I do for all of my exam, is that I come to the exam page. So this is the exam page. I will include this link in the description box below. As always, I just take a look at it, kind of try to see what the exam cover. And these are some of the things that you'll learn by studying for this exam, excuse me. And if you scroll down, you get a little bit more information about the exam description. Exam is about 90-minute long. It's funny because this 90 minutes can sometimes feel forever. And I think that as I go into higher level certificates and start taking more and more certificates, like the time increase. So it's going to be like, oh my God, it feels like forever. But 90 minutes right now feel like forever. You have performance-based. It's a combination of performance-based question and multiple choice question. Performance-based question for me was pretty interesting. It was kind of like a scripting question where they say, hey, here's a script, solve it. So that was pretty interesting. So you need to know scripting a little bit. It's 90 minutes, as I said here. 90 question. I keep saying 90 minutes. So 90 question, 90 minutes. So technically, they expect you to take 1 minute for each question. Yeah, no, that's a performance-based question. The multiple choice question, you can most likely do less than 1 minute per question. Just kind of read it and go through it and understand it and choose the right answer. Performance-based question, they normally take a little bit longer. So I normally do those last when I'm taking an exam. 720 passing score out of a 900, and then the rest here is the price. The price is about $338, which is pretty expensive. And as you scroll down a little bit more, I kind of break it down. So if you just want the exam voucher, and you just want one voucher, it's $338. If you want the bundle, the retake of one time, and then other things as well, it is about $449. One thing to keep in mind is that for those of you guys, I need to include it. I'm going to include that link in the description. For those of you guys that are currently in school, there is a CompTIA, I think, Academy website that I normally use to buy the voucher. You just need your school email and a school ID for verification, and there's substantial amount of discount here that you can get to buy the voucher, better than paying $300 and something else. So look for the link in the description box below. So that's pretty much it for the exam page. Next, we're going to move on to the exam objective. The exam objective, I always advise people to always look at the exam objective, and then reason being that the exam objective gives you a really good breakdown of some of the things that you need to understand before taking the exam, right? It is very important and very, 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 very critical for you to look at the exam objective before you start studying for the exam, because you get a book based on the exam objective. That's how I feel. So when you get in a book, when you get in something, get that based on the exam objective. That's very important, because you don't want to study and then it turns out that you didn't study really for things that you need to study for, and then you sit in front of the exam and they say, what is this? You're like, what? Excuse me? No, so always pay attention to the exam objective. It kind of tells you what domains are covered here: hardware and the system configuration, system operation and maintenance, security, Linux troubleshooting and diagnosis, automation and scripting. As I said, this part was pretty interesting. I did get a performance-based question based on scripting, so pay attention to that. I kind of break it down: bootloader, some of the things that you have to understand, grub and grub2, boot options, unify, PXI and all that stuff. File locations, you need to understand what these file locations are, how to navigate to them, that kind of thing, because they will ask you a tricky question. Trust me, they will. So you need to know how to navigate to them, but also know what they do as well. And the books that we're going to talk about, they do a very good job at covering some of the aspect of what these things are and what they cover. And take notes when you go into the book, highlight things and then come back and then go through that. So this is the exam objective. Again, very critical and very important for you to take a look at it before you start studying. Even before you get a book, it's very important that you take the exam objective and then look at the exam objective and try to understand what is required of you to be able to pass the exam. Next up is the video course that I use. For those of you guys that have seen my other video, I'm a huge fan. I'm a huge fan of IT Pro TV. IT Pro TV is one of the best IT training websites, or whatever you want to call it, out there. They're amazing. They have everything in one place. And granted, they don't have everything for all the exam, like the Azure exam that I'm studying for right now, and I'm going to create a series of video for that, by the way, so don't worry about that, it's coming. They have kind of like the video course, they have the practice test, but I don't think they have lab for it. But that's because you have to go to the Azure website itself and then create an account and then kind of play around with things, or just do their sandbox. I will explain it when the time comes when I talk about that exam. So they're amazing. They have, the video was great. Don Prezet is an amazing teacher. You can tell this guy is really good at Linux, especially when he talks about it. You can tell he's just passionate about it. And I think he's been a Linux administrator for like a very long time. I saw an interview of him one time where they were asking him, how many certificates do you have? And he was like, let me go down my drawer real quick and pull my box of certificates. And I'm like, really? I need to cat. Like, when you see things like this, you think you have enough certificates, and then someone is like, let me go down and just grab my box of certificate. You're like, man, let me go back to the drawing board. Anyway, so that was pretty interesting. An amazing teacher. He made this whole thing very fun. One of the best courses that I've looked at in IT Pro TV. They really go according to the exam objective. They pretty much cover everything that you need to know. Now, I wouldn't say that this is the only thing that you need to pass the exam. Watching this video and kind of taking the exam, for those people that are quite familiar with Linux, have been playing around with Linux for a long time, they might definitely be able to do that. But if you're new to Linux, this might be an introduction, and you might need a little bit more to pass the exam. So definitely a top-notch course here for the Linux Plus exam. And of course, they have their practice test, which you can use I'm not going to click into it, but you can go in here and you can take the practice test. This is, again, one of the reasons why I love IT Pro TV, because they have everything in one place. So you can, after you study for the exam, after you watch the video, after you read your book, you can come in here and take a whole bunch of practice tests. I think they have 100 and something questions, or I don't know how many they have, but they have several questions in there. And then of course they have the virtual lab. So for those of you guys that don't have a server at home, I do, or have some sort of hypervisor to install Linux, you can go through the practice lab, which I did, by the way, even though I have a Type 1 hypervisor at home. And I kind of convert my Linux workstation into my home workstation, my main driver, into a Linux computer, Linux OS. I install a Linux OS on it. I use Ubuntu at home because it's a lot more stable. I used to use something else, Arch Linux, but that's a different. And then I use Pop OS, and it's a different story. Probably I make a video about that someday, why I switched over. But anyways, pretty interesting, pretty good lab. It covers everything that you need to know for the exam. Really good for those of you guys that don't necessarily want to kind of build your own environment, don't want to put Linux on your work environment or your working environment, or don't have a hypervisor to install Linux on. This is a great lab. You go through it and it helps you pass the exam. And I think that's pretty much all there is for IT Pro TV when it comes to Linux Plus. Really good place, really good course, highly recommended. And I know it can be expensive a little bit, but as I always say, they have discounts. So if you cannot afford it, you can always send them a message. They might be able to work something out for you. So take advantage of it, send them a message. Great people, great lecture, amazing place to learn, not just Linux Plus, but a whole bunch of other things as well. And as I go along and I take a lot of my certificates, I will talk about them, and I will let you guys know which ones I like and which ones I don't. I'll be honest with you guys as always. But great course. I went through this course and I enjoyed it. Another course for those of you guys that don't want to necessarily go through the whole Linux, the whole IT Pro part of things, Udemy. Over and over again, I cannot recommend Udemy enough. If you go to Udemy, you type in Linux Plus, it's going to give you a whole series of courses. But I took this course because this one was a little bit different from the Linux course that I took over here. And I took this one because I wanted a different perspective of Linux. I wanted another course that kind of just talk about Linux as a whole and help me understand it as a whole. So I bought this one. It's about 11 hours, which was extremely interesting. I enjoyed it a lot, and it really helped me get a grasp of the whole concept of navigating inside of Linux, but also kind of scripting and things like that. It was a pretty interesting course. So I think I did about 75 or 80%. I think I did about like 70 or 80 something percent of it. I didn't finish the whole thing, but I did most of the important section of it. I covered most of the important section of it, which which was a lot. Combined with this course, the main course here, it's a lot. So for those of you guys that just want a secondary kind of Linux course, this is a great one. There's another course as well that's a scripting course, but you can just go to Udemy and type Linux. There's a whole bunch of courses there that will help you pass the exam or give you a different perspective other than the Linux Plus exam. And it's always good to have that, because sometimes these questions are so tricky that the questions and the performance-based question and the multiple choice are so tricky sometimes. But if you kind of go and get little bits and pieces for different places, when you sit in front of a test and then they ask you a question, it just clicks. You're like, oh, okay, well, I know this, and that kind of thing. So this is a great course to look at. It's not necessarily, again, let me just emphasize that one more time, it's not necessarily designed for the Linux Plus, but it will help you have a better understanding of Linux as a whole. This is a great place to learn Linux. So it's kind of like a lab environment, or kind of like an online kind of educational tool, and it's free. I'm going to include the link in the description box below. It gives you a different aspect of Linux. So it gives you the introduction, which talks about different aspect of Linux, and then it asks you a question, and then if you go back home, it will give you like command line. And then I went through this, pretty interesting, like the cat command, the file command, the less command, the mv command, the rm command, the mkdir command. So it gives you different aspect of Linux that you need to understand to help you pass the exam, because these are questions that they're going to ask you for the Linux Plus exam. So definitely take a look at it. It's a great place. It's a great lab environment. I would say a lab environment for those of you guys that don't want IT Pro TV. So definitely is something worth taking a look at. Thank you for watching the video, guys. If you haven't done so already, make sure you hit that subscribe button and thumbs up the video if you enjoyed the video. As I said, I am going to change the way I talk about some of the certificates that I'm trying to pass. For the ones that I've already passed, I can't really do what I'm trying to do, the whole series and vlog like kind of series of videos that I'm trying to create. I will talk about them, and just like this one. But moving forward, starting this coming weekend or this coming week, I'm going to create a series of video. I have a short video coming out talking about my plan for what I'm trying, the certificates that I'm trying to pass this year or before the end of the year. So it's going to be interesting. I have a lot of ideas. I have a lot of videos that I have planned coming out. It's just going to start picking up. Everything is going to start picking up. I got to my first 40 subscribers, so ooh, I'm excited. So that's pretty exciting. So it's going to be more videos coming out, more awesome videos. I have so much ideas of things that I wanted to put out. I've been wanting to do an IT channel for a long time, and I finally did it. So it's going to be an interesting journey. So make sure you hit the subscribe button, thumbs up if you enjoyed the video, and I will see you guys on the next one. As always, stay geeking. Peace.